registers and the timing aspects which is related to the implementation of the memory and registers we are going to study. Okay, and we will be studying about some sequential circuit, that is nothing but D flip flop we will be studying about, and the D latch you will be studying about, and the JK flip flop we will be studying about. After studying the design aspects which is related to the fundamental elements of the sequential circuits, how I can make use of this sequential circuits for the creation of the larger memory elements like the storage elements or the memory elements if you want to create means, then how I can go for the extension of the combination of this fundamental memory elements to yield for the larger memory sizes. All those details you are going to study in the module number 5. And lastly, we go for this testing and verification. Yes, I have designed a system and I need to test it. So what is the procedure I need to adopt it? So what are the parameters I should consider for the verification of my system? What is the design procedure I have adopted for that design procedure? So what is the testing flow I need to incorporate so that all the subsystems within the application or within the user interface, it will work fine when it reaches to the customer as an end product. So before it reaches to the customer end product, it is necessary as a manufacturer, as a designer, to test and verify all the components are working according to our constraints or not. We need to understand. So for that we will be using a different types of verification processes. Okay, and what are the different verification process we are going to use in the VLSI subsystem, we need to understand. And there are some test principles we have, that is built-in test principle we have, and self-test you have. So all those testing principle we are going to incorporate those testing instances for the design product, so that we can able to identify the fault, and for the fault which has been generated we can able to rectify the faults, and so that when it finally go for the manufacturing process, it will result me with a zero error rate. And finally we go for the design of testability. So in the design of testability, so whether whatever the design I have done for the using the VLSI technology, whether it is feasible for me to test or not, I need to understand. Okay, so all those details you are going to study in this module number 5 in the concept called as design of testability. Okay, so these are the things what we are going to study in this module number 5. So the first one is that system timing consideration is a fundamental process what you're going to measure or what you're going to include in the design process of your application. Okay, so when we start any design, so the fundamental job or the initial step of doing the any application or implementation is to take the specification from the customer end. So you have taken the specifications for the customer end, and you have created an architecture, or you have selected an architecture for the implementation. Along with that, how you are going to implement. So what are the controlling entities you are going to place for the implementation of your application? It has to be understood properly, and that we are going to study it another one subsystem, and that subsystem we call it as a system timing considerations. So in the system time consideration, in anything, so if you take a combination circuits or if you take a sequential circuit, whatever the operations you're going to do, the realization, it may be implementation of your adders, it may be implementation of some boolean expression, it has to be driven by the proper synchronized clocking system. So if your clocking system is not proper means, then the flow or the sequence of execution of instruction will be altered, so that you may not get a desired results what we are expecting at the end user. So therefore the system timing considerations has to be considered properly in overall the system. So what are the clock frequencies we are using for each subsystem, whether we are using a universal clock or whether we are using a different clocks for the different subsystem. If there is any phase differences there from one clock to another clock, that we need to understand. And what is the frequency we are going to select for one subsystem, and what are the parameters you are going to consider for the selection of that clock frequency. It has to be clearly analyzed depending upon the architecture what we have taken for the implementation of any applications. Okay, and then okay, now you have selected the memory elements, or you have selected the register element. So how this register element will act upon these clocking signals, whether the clock signal you have taken, whether it is feasible for the any read operation or write operation for the registers, so that has to be understand, and whether with a single clock I can able to do the read operation and write operation for the particular register, I need to understand clearly, so that during the implementation or during the testing of the behavioral model of our system, we will not get any error at the end product of the behavioral element. So that has to be analyzed properly. And you can see here the bits or data written onto the storage element may be assumed to have a settle before the immediately following phi 2 signal, and the alpha 2 signal may be used for refresh store data where appropriate. So means what? If your clock is not synchronized properly means, so before whatever the data you are going to write onto the memory register, if it is not settled properly, by the same time if you are applying one more clock signal means, then the next data will be overwritten on the previous data what it has been written. Why? Because you are not given a sufficient time to settle the data whatever you have written in the previous clock signal. So therefore, it is necessary for us to understand, so what is the time duration that a clocking signal it has been synchronized, so that the input signal what we are going to store on the registers, it will be settled, and for the next clock signal it will go on to the next memory element for the storage of the element. So if there is any delay it has been introduced in the data path signal, so how you are going to take care of those delays? Okay, how you are going to take care of those delays? Okay, so if a larger the triggering period of the, if the delay, if it is greater than the fundamental clock frequency what you are going to use is, then a complete mismatch will take place. Then the process, it may be reading process or it may be writing process, will not be executed properly. So therefore, the delay among the delay path, it has to be understood clearly, and what is the amount of maximum tolerable delay is required for the particular data path from one subsystem to another system has to be analyzed properly. And then when we want to read any data from the registers, so it has to gone through from the clock signal itself. Okay, so what are the timing signals you are going to fix for reading the data from a particular storage element has to be understood. So whether the read pin and the ANDing pin which has been associated with the one phase, that is phi 1, and how this read pin and write pin we are going to act upon a single storage element, so that reading and writing of the elements will be taken successfully. Okay, so these are the timing constraints what we need to consider when we are working on the storage elements of your VLSI subsystem. Okay. So the next one is, so this is the fundamental, the shift registers whatever we have implemented in the earlier modules. So we have written the mask layout of this. So there are two mask layouts are there. One is we call it as a mask layout of your NMOS by using NMOS shift registers we have used. And one more we are going to use a by CMOS technology we have implemented a shift registers. And generally these shift registers we are going to implement through the use of the D flip-flops. And we know that in the shift registers the data will be, and there are different types of shift registers we can use it. Either we can go for serial in, serial out shift registers we can go for, or we can go for serial in or a parallel out shift registers we can go for. So in the case of serial in and serial out shift registers, a 1-bit data will be entered into the particular storage element, that is a single element D flip-flop, and for the next clock cycle the LSB bit will be shifted to the next data element, whereas for the first data element the second LSB bit will be come and occupy the position. So like this, so if you have a 8 bit of data means, and after the 8 pulse, that is 8 clock pulse, it has been applied successfully, the data will be appearing, that is the LSB will be appearing at the end output in a serial in, serial out sequential, that is a shift register content. If you are going for serial in parallel out means, then the depending upon the number of elements what we are going to feed into our shift registers, so based upon that you are going to get a content in the parallel registers. So in the serial in parallel out registers, what we are going to do is we are going to feed the LSB bit as the initially for the serial in shift registers, whereas the output, so initial output when I take for the first clock serial in parallel output, so you'll be getting the LSB as a MSB and all the remaining bits are 0, 0, 0, so you'll be getting. But whereas in the case of when you read the content of the serial in parallel or shift registers, when all the elements or the an 8 bit of data, if it is fed, all the bits inside the shift registers means, then whatever the input you are given at the shift registers, that is a serial input, will be converted into a parallel input. So in this case, so we will be using a synchronized clock timing. Okay, so we will not use different clock frequencies in order to trigger each elements of the D flip-flops. So all the clocks or all the delay elements or all the data elements will be synchronously clocked with a single clock frequency that we call it as a phi 1. Okay, so this is the mask layout of your NMOS and the CMOS shift registers content. So generally, what are the elements we are going to consider? Okay, what are the elements we are going to consider for the storage or the memory implementation is? So we are going to consider dynamic shift register element we are going to consider. So when we implement a dynamic shift registers, so why we call it as a dynamic shift registers? Because it will change depending upon the dynamic instance of the clock signals. So therefore it is called as a dynamic shift registers we will be seeing. So this dynamic shift registers, it mainly focuses on three important parameters. The one we call it as a area, the next one is the power dissipation, and the third one we call it as a volatility. So area is nothing but the area occupied by each single element will responsible for the size of the memory element what we are going to implement. So when you implement any storage element, the area which has been consumed by a single standard cell or a unit cell, it has to be designed properly so that the overall n-bit shift registers will fall under within the miniature size. The next one is the power dissipation. So in the power dissipation, the amount of power which has been utilized for any shift register or a single element in order to produce the output, that also plays an important role in the measurements of the performance of the storage elements. If the storage element has not been clocked it, or if the storage element has not been triggered, it has to be in idle mode, and as a good designer in the idle mode, all the storage elements or any elements, it should consume a minimum amount of power so that the battery or means the power constraints of the entire subsystem can be met. And the next one is volatility. So volatility is nothing but, so how best we can able to store our data onto the shift registers will signifies the elements of volatility. So as a good dynamic shift registers implementation, the volatile has to be as minimum as possible. So these are the three things what we are going to looking for when we want to design a dynamic shift registers elements for the storage or a memory block implementation. So this is one of implementation of a dynamic RAM cell, that is a read-only memory we are implementing the dynamic RAM cell by the use of these three transistors. So you can see here in the NMOS implementation circuit, we have used one depletion type NMOS devices, and then we have used three transistors to implement. And the output we call it as a bus. Why? Because since it is a dynamic RAM cell, so whatever the elements we want to do it, it has to be written onto the bus. So therefore it has a VDD bus and the ground pin we have. And depending upon what operations we are going to do on a dynamic RAM cell, so there are basically we are going to do it two important operations. One we call it as a write enable and a read enable pin we are going to do it. So therefore you can see here all the three that is a transistors and has been energized through the use of these pins, that is a write pin and a read pin. Okay. This is how you can do the implementation of a dynamic RAM through the use of a NMOS transistor. So similarly the same thing if you want to go for the CMOS transistors means, then we need to have a pull-up transistors and a pull-down network. So you can see in the pull-up transistors we have made use of a P transistor, that is a PMOS transistor in implementation we have done. Whereas in the case of NMOS area, we have created two transistors, and these transistors has been energized, or these two transistors has been controlled by using a read pin and a enable pin. And the clocking for the synchronization of this dynamic RAM, so we are using a clock, that is 5 to clock signal we are using. But you can see when the implementation of your NMOS dynamic RAM, we have used the clock frequency is equal to 5.1, whereas in the case of implementation of your dynamic RAM by using CMOS technology, we have used the clocking signal as a 5 to bar. Okay, so these are the two things what we have done in the changes in the implementation through the use of CMOS and through the implementation of the by CMOS, and the corresponding stick diagram of the CMOS technology for the dynamic RAM has been written it over in this slide. These are the mask layout of the pull-up transistor and the pull-down transistors what we have implemented in the previous diagram. Okay, so this is the mask layout of the NMOS transistor and the PMOS transistors. So the total length and width ratio, so it is 21 lambda into 26 lambda, and whereas for the CMOS technology it is 24 lambda into 26 lambda. And you can see here the implementation through the use of CMOS technology, we have implemented the via contact cuts we have used. Okay, along with that the buried contact cuts, we have used the via contact cuts also for the connection of in the VSS terminal. Okay, so in the case of CMOS, so there will be pull-up transistor and the pull-down transistors. So we need to see this aspect ratio. So that is generally the pull-up transistor will be having a larger impedance when you compare to the pull-down transistors. So that the driver, that is output, will be clubbed to the VDD at all the times for the implementation. Okay, so these are the two mask layouts which are corresponding to your NMOS and the CMOS memory cell. The next one is one transistor dynamic memory cell. One transistor dynamic memory cell. So in the previous case, we have used the 3 transistor to implement a dynamic memory cell, that is a dynamic RAM. We can able to implement the 1 transistor dynamic memory cell through the use of this following circuit diagram. So you can see here we have a row select line. Along with this row select line, we have a read write pin. It has been connected to the drain of the NMOS transistors, and the source of this NMOS transistors, it has been connected to the capacitor for storage of the elements. And the corresponding stick diagram has been written it over here is, so we can see the source has been connected to VDD, and along with that it has been connected to the capacitor plate. So depending upon the row select value and whatever the excitation we are going to give for the read write pin, based upon that 1 bit will be stored on storage will takes place in the capacitor value. And the equivalent circuit diagram, it has been written it over here. So since we are making use of the capacitors to store a single element, so therefore it is necessary for us to indicate the presence of the capacitor over the circuit diagram or over the symbol. So therefore we have, you can see here we have written a VDD ground, and in between them we have created a place so that it will act like a 1-bit storage elements. Okay, so we have, since we are using a 1 transistor only for the implementation, so therefore we have represented this that is a source and the substrate element. So this is one of the simple dynamic RAM memory cell what we can able to implement through the use of 1 transistor. This is the mask layout of the 1 transistor, and you can see here the row select line. It has been given for the 2 values we have given. One is for the row select line for the pull-up transistors, and one more is a row select line for the pull-down transistors. And we have used the read pin at both the instances along with the boundary box. So this boundary box, it will give you a 1 single element, that is a standard cell will enable us. So if you want to connect one standard element with another standard element, means static memory cell. So what is the difference between static memory cell and a dynamic memory cell? So in the dynamic memory cell, the clocking signals will be dynamic with depending upon the clock frequency what we are going to use it. Whereas in the case of pseudostatic memory cell, the value what you are going to write, so it will be static, it will not able to change once the data has been written onto the memory cell means, so that will not be changed for the entire lifespan of the memory cell. So that we call it as a static memory cell. And here we have used this static memory cell in order to generate a pseudo vectors. So we are going to use this pseudo vectors in the case of implementation of a CRC implementation, that is a cyclic redundancy check, that is error correction and error detection, where we want to go for the realization of the data whether it has been received successfully or not. So we need to have a checksum bit has to be generated. So in order to create this checksum bits, so we are going to use this pseudo static memory cell. So this pseudo static memory cell, it is nothing but a bus with a combination of two inverters we have used. So which is having a read pin and write pin which we will be using. So with the use of this read pin and write pin along with the clock frequency Fn, we can able to generate a pseudo codes for the implementation of the CRC error checking mechanism. And the corresponding stick diagram has been written it over here. So you can see here we have used the pull up and pull down transistor ratio. For the first transistors we have used 8:1, and for the second transistor ratios we have used this as a 4:1. Okay, and both these transistors it has been energized, and a common bus it has been given for the data reading and writing operations. So with the use of this bus we can able to implement a write operation and read operation depending upon the what values we are going to feed it for the WR pin and the read pin along with the clocking frequency 5 values. Okay. So this is the stick diagram which is corresponding to the static memory cell.